at Dangerous Treasures Workshop. Welcome back, boys and girls. We've got another rebuilding episode for you. What we've got to do is we've got to build ourselves some building supplies. So we're going to show real quick how to handle turning logs into lumber. We're going to specialize on turning. That'll be the second part of the episode. The first part of the episode will actually go and show you how lumber is created, just dimensional lumber, the boring stuff. But do it. Okay, so what I have here is just a round. You can see it. It cut right off the tree straight through a chainsaw. I did sand it down, wet it a little bit so you can see it better. You can just ignore this. That looks like a spot that rotted out, and then I filled with, I don't know, sawdust maybe? That's soft. I won't tell you what type of wood this is because I do not know what type of wood this is. This is from early days. If you know, go ahead and tell me. But let's go over a couple of points here first. This right here is the pith. This is where the tree was very young. So what this is this is our no-go zone. When wood dries, it has to handle the radial aspect of the stresses it causes. Because when wood's wet, wood's big. Wood's real big. When it's dry, wood's real small. So we have to handle this tiny little circle against this big old circle that goes around up here. They're not going to stress at the same speeds. Now we're going to cover air drying because I don't want to go over kiln drying. I will go over microwave drying because microwave drying is quite the hoot. Let's get started real quick on lumber. When you buy something from the hardware store, chances are you got it just boring ripsawed. Boring ripsawed is going to be a piece just like this. I mean, they might split it here, but that's generally what you're looking at. Now, if you see that, you've got this ring it's intersecting and also this ring. This ring's going to shrink a lot less than this ring, so you are going to end up with warp. I believe it's going to warp about that way. That's what your board's going to end up looking like. Now, that's fine and dandy, that's okay. That'll still split on the ends. Okay, now that we've covered ripsaw, we've got to cover quarter sawn wood. Quarter sawn wood is much nicer as opposed to just standard ripsaw. A quarter sawn wood is going to be like this. Directly, as directly as possible from the pith. You've still got this part that's not really worth a whole lot of anything, but if you can see, it stair steps them out. You have a ring, and they're pointing in the same direction. That's a radial. It's the wood by nature wants to expand and contract the most in these two directions, radially. So from the center to the outside. So that board's going to be pretty consistent through it when it dries, when it gets wet, based on seasonal changes, what the temperature is outside, what the humidity is outside. It's not going to flex and create a bow. It's not going to do this number. It's going to do this number, which is good. That's preferable, which means we've still got our lines straight. There's a third method of gathering wood called splitting, which is where you literally just radially split out pieces of lumber. You can basically see the triangles I'm building there are your pieces. You won't often find this. You'll have to do that yourself probably because it wastes a lot of wood. All right, now when you're drying the wood itself has a preferential drying direction. That preferential drying direction is axially. Now why is it axially? Because when this tree was alive, it was moving water this way, it was moving water this way, it was moving nutrients this way, it was moving nutrients this way. Your radial direction is where it was just growing. So your ends are likely to split. That split gets too bad, you're going to ruin the whole board. If it starts splitting a little bit, well, maybe it'll be okay, maybe it won't. You need little honeycombing, some big old splits can be a big issue. So what you do, sometimes you just seal off the ends. This is a little turning I did. Just a piece of stock, I don't know, I might make a handle out of that someday or something. I just didn't want that little piece to go to waste. But you can see I just put paraffin in it. I used a pot that wife was going to throw away. Took that pot, filled it with some Gulf wax. I got a canning section of the store and just dipped it in there. I didn't dip it much. It doesn't need much. You basically just need to cover most of the end grain. I didn't get all of the end grain here, but I mean, it hasn't split. This thing's probably dry enough to act as a acceptable turning stock. Now, This is the other side of that piece of wood. We'll go straight into turning. Now, there's only a couple of different ways I would use this for turning. I would never really use the end grain. I like having that axial line going a long ways across the turning. Like, this is nice turning stock right here. So for this, it depends entirely on what I'm doing. If I'm making bowls, split it right across the middle. That's if it's super green, and I would split it in this direction. You can see how it's a bit oblong. Well, that seems to be the way that they don't like splitting. The crack is probably going to come along this side, from my experience, of course. Now, that'll give us 2 half-decent bowls, right? Now, even if I was turning out for spin, I would still have to be mindful of the pith. So this part would be basically useless. Would end up with a couple of boards over here and over here. Throw this away, it'd be all right. Now, if I was splitting for cups, say, I would do it in quarters. I would take those quarters, I would just round them out. Got that nice round there in the center. I would just turn that down. That would get rid of the pith, because we're going to end up with a circle in here. We'd end up with a nice little piece right here, which might be useful. Nice little piece right here, what might be useful. Throw that away, throw that away, throw that away. Bam, nice little spindle. That could be a baseball bat, I don't know, a rolling pin. This one would be a bit small for cups, but cups are doable in a lot of these. You can also split these 3 ways. So this way, and this way. It takes a little bit more dedication, touch of chainsaw work to kind of get you where you need to be. You need 3 wedges because you're working on a trio of stress lines there. Cracking is the devil. Every time I do a bowl, I'll cover it in shavings for a couple of days before I bring it inside. And when I bring it inside, I will check it every day for new stress cracks and fill those stress cracks with super glue. That cyanoacetate, as the craftsmen like to call it, because it doesn't have that brand name and everybody hates brand names. But let's take a look at a real quick trick I like to do if I have the time in the wood. This here's a piece of lumber I've had sitting here for, 3-4 months. You can tell it's been here a while because it's trying to grow back at me. Stop it. Just brush that off real quick. Oh, hey, what's that? It's already split right along the pith, right there. Which means that when this piece of wood dries, that's where it wants to split anyway. You can maybe see it's got a bit of an ellipsoid shape here. Now, I don't know why it grew as an ellipsoid. It might have had branches. You can see that the pith is off-center pretty bad. I actually got this wood from a great friend of mine. Probably grew on the edge, or there was a tree too close to it, probably over here. That's why I was trying to grow all over here. Either way, we can abuse this stress line because that's where it wants to split. It kind of wants to split here. We'll avoid cutting that until we pull this down and see what's actually inside of there. But that'll minimize any stress cracking we end up with. This is the preferred way that I split my wood. Can't always do it. Wood isn't always a little bit fallow. Had time to figure out where its own stress points are, and you got to make them for them. Which is why on a batch of wood, every time I get a batch of wood, the first couple of them are going to start splitting, so I got to stock up with a big old bottle of that super glue. Here's a fun little trick we can use in our smaller, thinner woodworking. The microwave. It's actually broken. I don't want to run it. It'll pop my breaker. But if you were to say put this piece of wood in just a conventional oven, you would only end up heating this outside bit. If it's too wet, you know what's going to happen? These bits are going to shrink. When these shrink, you're going to end up with nasty checking along the edges. Because of that, that crack may spread inwards because it's the nature of it. Using convection, you can only get so many parts of it so hot. But with the microwave, we actually penetrate the heat down in further. Because we're penetrating the heat down in further, we're actually steaming parts of the wood. We're getting it hot all throughout. Now, the difference, well, let me take that back just one step. Wet wood is more malleable. Hot wet wood is the most malleable wood you can get. So what you're doing is you're steaming a big part of this. Because you're steaming it, you make it so that it's more flexible, more bendable, so that it has the time without checking to actually get moisture out. It's also going to make the moisture more mobile. And because you're going deeper, you're going to have more of the wood heated at the same time. It's a nice little trick. If you do it too hard, you will end up with lumps of charcoal on the inside. If you do it too hard, you can still cause checking. Do it on a nice little cycle. It's generally recommended by experts that you only do it for about 30 seconds at a time. But you know what? If you're doing something thicker, if you're doing something like this, I would hazard to do it 4 or 5 minutes at a time, just because, well, 4 or 5 minutes for the initial shot, and then maybe follow that up with a minute, maybe 2 if I've let it cool down too much. But just because you have so much bulk, this is one of the best tools in the garage. I don't even have one of these in my house. There you go. You now have the considerations taken into place whenever you're turning a tree into wood. Probably the only thing left is, how do you know when it's actually dry? That's a great question. You can get pin-based moisture meters where you just stab it into the wood. You can do differentials based on weighing it. And my personal favorite, which takes a little bit of effort and some learning, is just pick up that piece of wood and you know about how heavy it should be. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes trial and error. But you'll get there eventually if you give it the effort. Until then, go get you building some buildings.